Man, is it awesome to have my friend, your friend, one of the absolute best to ever do it. And I'm not just blowing smoke up his ass because Mike Silver is that good. It's always a pleasure to run into you. Just human being to human being. You just bring joy to everybody, Mike. So thanks for making time.
Well, that is an incredible intro. So right there, it's, worth the price of admission. And listen, man, from afar, just I admire what you're doing so much. You're a beast. I tell you that all the time. You're the most prolific writer I can imagine, let alone with your, you know, growing family and all the other stuff you got going. But if all you did was work 24 hours a day, I would still go the output and the quality is it insanely prolific. So, very stoked to be here with you. I'm glad we could carve out a second between us. And yeah, man, I'm sure I'll see you in some random city. I feel like at some point you and I are gonna end up in the same shit show at the same time without having discussed it. Like there's gonna be some team that is just a mess and it hasn't really come out yet what a big mess it is. And of course, I will descend on it, and I'll be like, "Ah, Ty's here already, man." But that's gonna happen soon.
It is fun. Well, we were hanging out there at Bill's training camp and like talking about stuff that we were chipping away at. And like this, I mean this with the utmost respect. I didn't really want to tell you what I was working on, Mike, because I'm like, shit, you might be, working those bear sources as well.
Oh,
Uh,
trust me, yeah. I'm like, we're not talking about my next few weeks right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
I only talk about that with my partner in crime, Diana Rossini, who is going a million miles a minute. So I can barely keep up, but it's
Wait,
the best.
you guys just do phenomenal work. Everybody out there, I'm sure they read your stuff. We go back to Sports Illustrated here in terms of just when I first kind of got on everything Mike Silver as a kid growing up here in the Southern Tier. When you dropped a feature, it was stop what you're doing and read about Dennis Rodman, who you have behind you framed. I mean,
My
I,
guy.
I gotta say, I think like the first time we really got to know each other, it would have been out in Seattle, maybe ahead of the Packers NFC Championship game, because I vividly
Yeah.
remember throwing drinks back with you out there in Seattle, and you're just reliving that wild ride out in Vegas with Dennis Rodman for the SI story. It's like seared in my memory, getting the backstory on everything. We got to get to the book, but before that, like that just has to be a core memory to the day you die. Partying with
Yeah.
Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, and what was awesome is that so I'd only been at SI, since the previous November, so it was May now of 1995, and they just kind of called me and said the Spurs are playing the Lakers in game six of the Western Conference semis. Rodman's getting weird. Just go down there and see if you can hang with him. And I was in the middle of a crazy work run. Didn't have kids yet, but my wife was kind of like, "Dude, are you ever going to be home?" So my first thought was like, this is going to be hard." And then I went down there, didn't have anything set up, and ended up on a 4-day, three-state bender with very little sleep, and ended up doing a book with him and all that. And the story you see behind me, but the there was a recognition in the moment. It was so out there and so he was pushing it so hard. And remember, this was the mid 90s for a prominent athlete to be talking about gay sex fantasies and hooking up with Madonna and, many other envelope pushing topics. It was a lot different back then in Sports Illustrated, let alone. And at one point, Rodman kind of was like, we're on one of our flights we ran to catch with the boombox blasting Pearl Jam and whatever else. And pre 9/11, so you could just run for the flight. It was crazy. And Rodman's like, "So what are you doing? What are you doing after this?" And I was like, they actually had me doing some NASCAR story. It turned out to be this black and white cover that SI ran about NASCAR, America's fastest growing sport. And he was like, "Oh, that sounds boring as shit." And I'm like, "No, actually, the access is good. They're kind of characters," because I had done some stuff at the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. There was a race at Sears Point I used to cover. And then, he kind of talked about how boring everybody else was and how this was going to be the pinnacle for me. And, at one point I kind of was like, I hate to admit this to myself, but I think he might be right. Like, not like I'm not going to get good stuff in the future, but it might not ever be this weird, this cutting edge, this, just thrown out there, in real time. So, I tried. I got on the balcony with John Elway at the hotel in Fort Lauderdale after his last game when he was Super Bowl MVP and he's smoking a cigar, drinking a beer, and the rain's coming
Yeah.
down. Like I've definitely been in some wild, cool moments I never thought I could get to journalistically, but it was definitely different with Rodman.
That's what I love about you, Mike Silver, though, is you find a way to build relationships and hurl yourself into environments that nobody else can. I mean, that's what we try to do here with Go Long is go beyond the press conference, go beyond the
Yeah.
locker room. And it's so in 2025, it's harder than ever to do that. But I think the more you cover the game, the more you're around people, the more you can kind of build those relationships. And that kind of brings us to the why is everything.
Well, before we get there,
Yes.
I gave you like I mentioned 9/11 there in passing. I just wanted to note for the world that if you're ever thinking about coordination and teamwork and you're looking for an example to throw out there, look no further than what Sean McDermott tried in a speech in front of probably 100 people that stayed quiet for years until my guy here put that into the public sphere. And I know you and Sean have had a great journey, and you've worked through a lot of stuff because he didn't love that, and your coverage has been incredible. But that's one of those, I always send the Oasis song "Live Forever" to Diana and some other people when I feel like we're on something that is going to endure journalistically. And last year, after I got to the Athletic, we were working on the Woody Johnson Jets story. We ended up talking about the Madden rating of Jerry Jeudy and how Woody Johnson nixed the trade because Jerry Jeudy's Madden rating wasn't high enough, presumably because his teenage sons told him. And, every time there was stress about the story with Zach Rosenblatt and Diana, I'd just send them Live Forever. And then afterwards, when it gets referenced still. So I would say that Sean McDermott citing the 9/11 Flight 93 hijackers as an example of coordination and teamwork to his players is one of the most live forever things in my career that I've experienced. So bravo.
Well, it you know what? At the end of the day, our jobs aren't that complicated. Like when we're just talking to these coaches and scouts and players, and you know, not really going in with a preconceived idea of this is what the story will be about. Just having conversations.
Yeah.
What is that moment that will make your jaw just drop to the floor? That moment that you'll probably talk about with, coworkers at the proverbial water cooler or at the bar with your buddy. That when I heard that, like everybody else, I just had the same reaction everybody else did is what? And
Well,
yeah,
well,
you're
my first reaction, because I think I just saw it mentioned on social media, my first reaction is that's got to be the Onion. Like, there's no way that's actually real.
I really thought that was he referencing like the heroes on the flight
Right.
who prevented
Yeah,
another
the
attack,
Flight
but
93 coordination. What it was, I mean,
yeah.
I wouldn't touch 9/11. I mean, my kind of general rule is no Holocaust, no Katrina, no 9/11. Just, it doesn't really lead to anything good usually. And, I experienced, two of those pretty vividly in my lifetime. And yeah, but had it been about the Flight 93
Right.
heroes, it would have been
Right.
potentially defensible. One of the great postscripts from that is that, I of course became obsessed with it, and I talked to a coach who was on that staff, and he basically, confirmed every single part of that report. And then I said, so, I kind of kept digging, and he goes, the amazing thing to me is that Sean always had this thing where he would run a speech by one person, a different person each time, but he would always run it by one person first. He's like, who was the person who he ran it by who like greenlit that? Like, hey, I got this great idea. Like,
And it took Kyle Williams after the fact telling Sean, like, look, you've got to get back out there and apologize and talk to the players because it's, people aren't happy about it. But I think like and we'll get off of 9/11 and Sean McDermott. I promise everybody. But the reason
I'm
it's
sorry.
noteworthy and newsworthy though, Mike, is like with Sean, he was so detailed and meticulous
Right.
and overthought everything. I mean, you can kind of follow the logic there, and like if evil can orchestrate something like this and come together like this, imagine what we could do for something good.
Right. Yeah,
No,
no, I never
if people can do
doubted
this for
Sean.
evil, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just way too much thinking, way
Yeah,
overboard.
I never
9/11, you
doubted
just got to stay
Sean's,
away from it.
yeah, never doubted Sean's pure intentions or patriotism or anything like that. I just was, yeah, I think it's what you said. He gets so in locked in the moment, which is a good quality, and as you've
Yeah.
documented, something he's kind of stepped back from and improved upon.
Exactly. He's definitely
Yeah.
consciously evolved to loosen up and be a little more personable. All right, I had a segue in my head. So when it comes, yeah, your relationships, it's hard to really get people to disarm and be themselves while still, covering these teams and coaches objectively, right?
Well, and
And
I would
follow,
take it a step further. So in 2007, I became a columnist at Yahoo. So now I'm giving opinions very strongly. Much, SI was kind of doing .com columns on the side, but those magazine pieces were much more, third person objective, and then I was a columnist, and then I was at NFL Network on TV giving my opinions while writing and sometimes in print or on the internet, and now I'm kind of a hybrid. But the world has changed. Like when I started in
yeah,
journalism, you either gave opinions or you didn't, and there was a strict line. And so yeah, trying to get people to trust you and have relationships and sustain relationships is hard enough. But then when you also are ripping some of them at times, and I just before we get into my book, which I was your real segue, which of course is important and pertains to this. I covered that Cowboy Packer 80-point orgy of tidiness, the Micah game, and I have a long relationship with Jerry Jones, dating back to the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and Jerry's probably of all the people I've ripped at times over the years, he's probably the best at understanding that it's part of the gig and it's not personal. And I worked for his network for 8 years and would sometimes bang on him on his network, and he understood, hey,
yeah,
that's good for business. We're not Pravda, it's cool. So, but I kicked him in the shins pretty hard before the Micah trade and certainly after, and hadn't seen him. And there's a big group after the game outside the locker room because Jerry holds court after home games. And when I finally got close enough to kind of, ask something and he saw it was me, he just turned and he goes, man, you ripped me a new anus. And, and then he looked at me and Clarence Hill, who's longtime Cowboy beat guy, who's amazing, and just go, man, all the whiskey and wine I bought you over the years, y'all, and now you're killing me. And, he did it with a smile on his face. He definitely meant it, but also, it's Jerry, so I wasn't like, oh my God, he's attacking me. But yeah, it's a fine line we all walk. And what's the line in Almost Famous where he tells them, you got to be merciless, and I'm not one of these old journalists. They're not your friends. It's all transactional. Like, no, I'm a exceptionally charming human, and I'm trying to get deep in and get people to trust me
yeah,
and tell what I believe is a faithful, fair, and accurate story. Objectivity is kind of hard in our world, but I don't really believe in objectivity. I believe in fairness and accuracy. Uh, but yeah, it's you know, we all have our moments where we have to take our lumps and it's uncomfortable and, sometimes physically threatening and, you deal with it as an occupational hazard.
But this book over your shoulder, it doesn't happen without those relationships, right? The why is everything. There it
Yes,
is,
the
October
the paperback
2024, a story
apparently
of
is
football
about to
rivalry and
drop. I just got
revolution.
an email. This hardback's still available everywhere books are sold. Anywhere you click or support your local bookstore, you know this drill from your awesome tight end book. And yes, you know, it's I'm really proud of it. It was kind of existing in non-book form for a while. I knew something was happening. I had all these relationships, and eventually I wrapped my arms around it. And during the lockdown, I had a lot of time to kind of think and reassess, and
Hmm.
kind of crafted it into what it became. But I think people will definitely enjoy it if you get a chance to check it out.
I freaking loved it. I didn't know what to expect. I listened to it, full transparency. I listened to the
That's
Audible,
cool.
which,
Thank you.
you know, I do prefer to read, but sometimes we're traveling, we're mowing lawns, we're chasing children, all that good stuff. But I wanted it to keep going. It was long and it wasn't long enough. And you bring these characters to life in a way where I think people listening, even if like you love football, but you don't necessarily like the schematics. You're not a film nerd. You're not grinding the all 22. I think you'll love this book because it's real life. I mean, you've got this group of friends who are all coaching together. They're innovating the sport. They're better together. They're grinding. They're up all night. They're trying to push the envelope and think of football in different ways. And then egos get involved. They want to become their own men. They're at each other's throats. They want to kill each other on Sunday, and you do such a great job of character building. I mean, but I'm thinking of Kyle Shanahan in a completely different way now. Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel, Matt LaFleur, Raheem Morris, and then all the tertiary characters around them. I just got to give you props first of all. I mean, it's if you do like the nuts and bolts, it's in there a lot of it, and you can kind of see how football has changed offensively and why they've been at the forefront of it all. But I was more intrigued by just the human condition, and there's a lot of insecurities, mixed in there as well.
Pettiness.
There's Mike McDaniel and his drinking problem. There's Matt LaFleur, the taint. He doesn't want to be the taint anymore. He wants to be his own man. I take it any direction you want, but like to you, why did you take this project on? What did you love most about the idea of writing a book on all these offensive coaches who changed football forever?
Well, I mean, it really started. So, as a young beat writer at the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, first the now defunct Sacramento Union for a minute, and then the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, which was a New York Times owned paper. I've come full circle now at the Athletic. It's wild. But yeah, the 49ers were my first beat starting in 1989 when they were about to win their fourth Super Bowl in 9 years, and Joe Montana and Ronnie Lott, Jerry Rice, George Seifert had just replaced Bill Walsh, and then Mike Holmgren left to become the coach of the Green Bay Packers after the 1991 season, which had been a very disappointing season for the Niners. Joe Montana had missed the entire year with an elbow injury. Steve Young had come in and won the passing title, but was choppy, and they fans didn't like him, and they started 4-6, ended up going on a great run, just missed the playoffs at 10-6, would have made some noise, but it was a rough season. And for the first time, they kind of had to go outside the Walsh tree since Walsh had come there in 79 and get someone to run the offense. And George Seifert ends up hiring this embattled coach, Mike Shanahan, who had been the young head coach of the Raiders, the LA Raiders. Think Lane Kiffin. It did not go well, and it didn't last long. And it ended acrimoniously. Then he went back to Denver, where he'd been a successful assistant, but got fired ingloriously by Dan Reeves, who accused him of sabotaging him, of insubordination. Basically, Dan Reeves said Mike Shanahan and John Elway were going behind his back and running their own game plan, which in retrospect probably they should have been if they did. I mean, I think Mike Shanahan would say he wasn't insubordinate, but also like Mike Shanahan and John Elway probably should be running that offense. So he was really damaged goods, and he came into that building as an embattled guy. And then Steve Young, who, you look at and go, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, he's an all-time great. But Steve Young was an ultra talented guy who had not proven that he was a great NFL quarterback. And in San Francisco and in that area, he was not Joe. So there was a lot of negativity about Steve Young. He runs too much. He doesn't run the offense. It's just a mess. He can't win close games. So together, Mike Shanahan and Steve Young made this beautiful music together for 3 years, culminating in that incredible Super Bowl 29 performance where he throws a record 6 touchdown passes. They win by 1,000,000 points against the Chargers, and now Steve Young elevates, and Mike Shanahan then immediately goes to Denver, takes the Walsh offense and outside zone and combines them and wins 2 Super Bowls and creates what is now that system that all these guys are running, including his son. But when I was covering the Niners still, before I went to SI, and I saw this up close transformation with Shanahan and Young, it was mind blowing because Steve Young used to tell me, dude, bro, Mike Shanahan, like Holmgren's amazing. Holmgren would go, this is our offense. These are our plays. We're going to run them. They won't be able to stop them. We'll always have answers and we will win. And we did. He goes, but Mike Shanahan, it was a completely different thing. He would come in and go, okay, this is who we're playing this week. This is what they do. This is what their coach likes. This is how he thinks. This is how their players think. This is how we're going to use their rules against them. We're going to do this and this. We're going to make them do this. And then we're going to expose them and exploit them. And if and Steve would be like, whoa, it's next level strategic, opponent specific, but it's also demonic. It's personal. Mike Shanahan's like, I'm gonna tear apart Fritz Shermer. I'm gonna prove that he doesn't know, like whoever. It just and
Yeah.
Steve got like energized by it. He was like, it's the most unbelievable thing. So like covering that, and then of course covering Mike very closely in Denver when I was at SI, I kind of knew how different and rare he was. And then knowing Kyle since he was 14, and as there's this moment I have with Kyle where I think at the San Diego Super Bowl, the first one the Broncos won against the Packers, so Super Bowl 32, or 31,
That would have been
31.
32. You're right.
32. The Packers won 31. So, as the guy at SI writing the gamer, I was looking for access, and Mike was like, okay, cool. Here's what you're going to do. There's like a town car that'll take me from practice at UCSD back to our hotel. You'll ride with me in that town car. We'll go up to my suite. We'll hang out and we'll talk. And I did that. And when we got to the suite, he was like, I'm gonna go take a shower. Just, are you cool? And I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And couldn't play with a phone back then. Not, or there was a phone, but you couldn't really play with it. But his son was there, Kyle, and he just left me and Kyle in the main room for I don't know 40 minutes while he showered. And I I vividly remember the conversation. It was like I didn't ask him one football. I mean, I was like, so dude, what's the deal, man? You're in high school? And he was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I just started, I'm early in high school. And I was like, so you moved from the Bay Area to Colorado? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, and your dad's the coach of the Broncos? And he's like, yeah. And I go, well, what's it like? And we just talked about like his high school experience. And I was like, are you getting girls? I mean, I was completely, you know, completely locked in on, things like that, which were, more human. So Kyle, of all the people for this book specifically, was the one who was the most resistant and didn't
Hmm.
give me a lot of book specific time. He did end up giving me a lot of time because I was simultaneously working as a San Francisco Chronicle columnist during some of it, and before that at NFL Network and Bally. So I got enough, but Kyle was the one who was the most like, I don't want to bleeping book, but I've known him the longest. So anyway, when Kyle became a young coordinator, the youngest coordinator of the league at Houston, and I saw the cool stuff he was doing, I kind of had pride. I was like, that's Kyle. Like, look at Kyle go. There's this early game where his first year as coordinator, I remember watching it from some press box vividly. It came down to um, they had like fourth and goal at the 5 with like 5 seconds to go, down 4 or 5 points. And they had one play, might have been at the 4, but it was, it wasn't at the 1. And it came down to one play. And he ran a quarterback draw with Matt
Yep.
Schaub. And
Yep.
Matt Schaub is not, that ain't RG3. It's not even, it's not even Baker Mayfield. Like Matt Schaub is not fast, but because it was so perfectly set up schematically, and because no one would ever expect Matt Schaub to do that, it, you know, worked perfectly. And I remember like yelling at the TV, like, wow, go Kyle, So, and then when he really the book was formed in my head originally when I didn't know it was a book, but when they got to Washington and then drafted RG3, who'd never run anything except out of the pistol, and they had to play him, and he took the league by storm, and no defensive coordinator adjusted all year, and it was crazy. I went out there kind of later in the year, and I remember sitting. It must have been Mike's office, but I think with Mike and Kyle, and I was like, with scheme, I don't purport to know scheme. I've been around it now a lot, so I know terms and I know basic things. And the only time I ever feel like I know anything, honestly, like I'll be at a college game. I love Cal and my alma mater, and I'll be at a
Yep.
college game and I'll be like with my friends, and I don't know why I'm saying it or thinking it. I'll just go, a screen here would be amazing, and they'll do it, and they'll be like, how do you know? And I'll be like, I actually don't know. I just know I'm seeing simple defenses, and I kind of have this vague, immersion. But like, I don't really know scheme. Like, when I sit at a game next to Jordan Rodriguez, my colleague, I literally am like, hey, what happened there? Explain that to me. Like, and it was the
Yeah.
same way with Dr. Z at SI. Like, I don't know it. I don't watch film. I know enough to speak the language. So I remember being in that office with Mike and Kyle, and I'm like, hey, can you guys like explain what's going on? And they were just kind of like, Kyle just goes, yeah, we're running our shit, but just out of the pistol. And I was like, huh? And he's like, yeah, we're just running our offense. And I go, what do you mean? You took your entire Shanahan scheme and just put it in the pistol, which is not as simple as it sounds. And we get into that in the book, but it's high concept. And basically, yeah. And, RG3 threw for over 3,000 yards, and more than a third of them that year were on
Yeah.
a simple play concept called
Yeah.
drift, where he kind of blindly play fakes off the zone read, turns around and throws into a spot at the second level, but the safeties and linebackers have all pushed up because of the threat of the run. And the corners are with the receivers, and a guy cuts in, and there's this open area, and they just feasted. So I knew that was weird, and I knew that crew because of those years. And then when they branched out to Cleveland and Atlanta and LA and Green Bay and all that, I knew those guys pretty well, and realized what fascinating characters they were. And I started taping Mike McDaniel as early as like 2018, and I didn't really know why. It's like maybe there's a book here eventually, but McDaniel was kind of the first guy where I was just like, "Hey, can we go get a meal? And can I just tape this? It's fascinating." And he spoke so openly, and Mike McDaniel. One thing about him, which I know he's going through it right now, but but you know this, many coaches, when you get them in a private moment, they'll complain about this player doesn't do this, or I coach this guy to do this, or I wish this guy could do this. But Mike McDaniel's like a hyper positive evaluator. Like he'll be like, I know that is frustrating, but you should see this one in-breaking route this guy runs. It's elite. You should see the steps. Like he focuses on what a player can do, and he kind
Yeah.
of has this, as dry and sardonic as he can be with his humor and as biting, he's also like weird, hyper positive. No, this guy's, I think it hurts him. I think he probably was so in love with Tua's positive qualities that they
Right.
paid him a lot of money before they had to. But yeah, so then it just, then what you referenced, I started understanding the rivalry and the pettiness and and because Shanahan and McVay were thrust into that Rams Niners thing, it was on. LaFleur ends up in Green Bay, and that becomes very charged, especially as he believes that
Yeah.
Kyle, his friend, with inside information because they're friends, is trying to steal Aaron Rodgers from him at a vulnerable time. And you knew it would come back to Aaron Rodgers somehow. And then McDaniel feels as though he's under Kyle's thumb, and that Kyle, one of the things in the book that hasn't really gotten as much outside attention as I thought it would, but that there's a chapter called The Liberation of Mike McDaniel, and he felt like Kyle had held him down, and in
Yeah.
fairness, Kyle wanted him around. He's very important, and I do think Kyle may sincerely have thought, Mike, it's going to be a lot of pressure. He's had this bout with alcohol. I don't know if Mike's ready yet. It's his first head coaching interview. But when Mike finally gets a head coaching interview, his first one ever with the Dolphins, at first it's on Zoom. It's during the playoffs, and um, and Mike on Zoom. I'll never forget when Mike became the nominal coordinator, and as he said to me, now Kyle has to let me talk. He can't hide me. So Mike asked me if I'd tune in on his first press conference because it was on Zoom and just give him an eval. And I called him afterwards and I go, I thought it was pretty good. I go, did anyone get that joke at the beginning? And he goes, I don't know. It was on Zoom. It's the word, like I couldn't tell. So anyway, Mike's getting ready for this interview, first one ever, and they're getting ready to play, I think, the Packers in the 2021 playoffs and in Green Bay. And he has to go to a room at Levi's that he's never been to in the stadium. It's kind of already awkward. And his agent is setting up the time with the Dolphins, who are also interviewing other people. And, there's a small window, right? It's like 36 hours that this can take place by rule on the first interview, and everything has to be scheduled. And Kyle abruptly changes the 49er
Yeah.
practice schedule twice. Once and then again, which is unlike a coach during the playoffs. And Mike views it as he is trying to sabotage me. And, he's messing with me. And so twice Mike's agent has to call the Dolphins and be like, is there any, he can't miss practice. It's a playoff week. Is there any way we could change the time? And, the Dolphins end up, though, viewing it as, I think Kyle wants to keep Mike. He might be pretty good. Like, it didn't end up hurting him, obviously. But yeah, lots of intrigue that
That
continues to
was
this
my favorite
day.
chapter, by the way. The
Thank
liberation of
you.
Mike McDaniel. I love that chapter
Thank
because you
you.
can
Yeah, it's
just
funny. I
see.
wrote it. I wrote that one early in the
Yeah.
sequence. A lot of it I, wrote in sequence ultimately, but at one point I was just like, that one's coursing through my veins, and I'm just gonna write this one now. And by the way, I'm glad you said you wanted more because I want to clip that and play it for my editor Dan Gerstel, who is now the literal editor of Norton Books. He became that during the process, so there was no court of appeal, but he cut about a third of it, and I trusted him to do it. He's a very good editor, but I love you saying that because I'll send you the Word files, and you'll be like, "Whoa, there is a lot more."
I mean, and it's because of those characters, like in that chapter on Mike McDaniel, like he wants to become his own man. He wants to take over his own team, but he also knows there is a lot of good for working for Kyle. You're learning a lot. You're going to stay at the cutting edge of offensive football. There's something special building here, but that push and pull behind the scenes. What, could you get the sense how frustrated was he really when he just couldn't bust out and prove? that he's a head coach, that he could run a team. Like you said, he's going through it now, and we can touch on that too. But that was really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was frustrated. So if you go back, Mike had been with Kyle and was this young kind of protege, and he very non-traditional background and had been a bench warmer wide receiver at Yale. It started
Hmm.
when he was the Bronco ball boy, who was a psycho who would run, sprint to get the ball and embarrass himself because they had lost this playoff game the year before the two Super Bowls. They were upset by the Jaguars, and one of the key moments that cost them the game was Michael Dean Perry, their big nose tackle, didn't get off the field in time, and they got caught with 12 men on the field, and it extended a Jaguars drive. So in Mike's mind, he was like, "I'm going to show everyone on the team like you got to run."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and the way he became a ball boy was he was just this, kind of kid with a single mom and not much money who would go up to Broncos camp in Greeley where he lived, and he lost a fitted Charlotte Hornets hat that he was trying to have double autographed by Robert Del Pino, and the video director at the time saw him crying when he lost his hat and bought him a new one and ended up dating and then marrying Mike's mom. So it's this crazy story. So Mike ends up, as this beautiful mind who is part of this, but because of his drinking issues, he gets banished to the UFL for a couple of years, and then even when he comes back, he kind of gets leapfrogged by
yep,
Matt LaFleur and Sean McVay, and Mike LaFleur was on track to leapfrog him, at one point, and others, and people are kind of like, what's the deal with him? So he crafts this plan as the Falcons are in the Super Bowl because after the first year um, in Atlanta, he was caught drinking on the job. Dan Quinn was very good with him and said, "Why don't you go to rehab? But we're not going to fire you." He ends up going to rehab and he uh, gets clean to his credit. And now they're getting ready for that Super Bowl, the one against the Patriots. I don't know if you know this, but the Falcons would hold a 28-3 lead in that game, but that's an aside. But at Media Day, he crafts this plan where, not with Kyle's blessing, who's his coordinator
right,
boss, but
right.
and he says, I'm gonna go Eminem and 8 Mile, the famous scene where, in the rap battle, he decides, I'm gonna eviscerate myself and just, talk about how flawed I am and diss myself, and that'll disarm my opponent
Yeah,
because no one could diss me as hard as I diss myself, and then I'll diss him. So Mike ends up doing this interview that's kind of pre-planned, and he says, "Yeah, I was an alcohol, and nobody knew this. I had alcohol issues. I'm this and that, and it doesn't end up making a huge splash, partly because this is this is an incredible aside. At the same media day, Devontae Freeman went on a thing about how he wanted more money, which was a big deal. It was right before the Super Bowl. And that was
yes, I
part of a
remember that. That was
plan.
down in
That was
Houston. I was
part
there
of
for
a
Bleacher Report.
pre-planned thing because, oh, no, he didn't do it at Media Day. I dropped a story in and on NFL.com 2 hours before Media Day. Devonta Freeman quoted, "I want more money." And then he was asked about it Media Day. And the story was dropped by me. That was a crafted plan by me and Luke Campbell, Uncle Luke of Two Live Crew,
Yes.
who I go way back with, and as he said to me as we were coming up with this, we done a lot of shit worse than this, and I could get into that. But he was his wife at the time, Kristen, was Devontae Freeman's agent. Devontae had come up in Luke's uh, youth football program, which was renowned in Miami's Liberty City neighborhood where he grew up. So um, that was because of our plan. It kind of dwarfed what they were trying to do. But yeah, Mike in his mind basically like he went Eminem and 8 Mile, and now you can't hurt me. But Kyle kept telling him, you're not ready. And the one that really stung Mike, and he understood. But Robert Saleh gets the Jets job, and it's kind of understood that Saleh's going to either take Mike LaFleur, who's the pass game coordinator, or Mike McDaniel, who's the run game coordinator. for Kyle. Neither had the OC title. And Kyle had blocked Matt
Mhm.
LaFleur when he got the Packer job from hiring his brother, Mike. So just to give you an idea of how this stuff goes, because he didn't want to lose him. So Saleh was basically like, if I get a job, I'm taking whichever one Kyle lets me take. I'm going to stay on good terms with Kyle. Well, I knew what was going to happen. As good as Mike LaFleur is, Mike McDaniel was the guy Kyle trusted to do the run game. He was the run game genius, and there's no way he's losing that. Kyle could fudge the passing game with whoever the new guy is. Turned out to be Bobby Slowick, like it was pretty good. But the run game was like Kyle's, you know, the only person who knew the run game like Kyle was Mike, and Kyle trusted him to take it to another level. So that's what happened. Kyle said, "You take LaFleur." He goes with Saleh to the Jets. Mike gets the coordinator title, accepts the job, accepts the raise. It's announced. Uh, right after that, Brandon Staley gets the Charger job,
Right.
which McVay hadn't seen coming. A lot of people hadn't seen coming. Brandon Staley had kind of said to McVay, hey, he was a first year defensive coordinator, and Kevin O'Connell was a first year offensive coordinator. They were very close. And Staley had kind of said to Sean, hey, if I get head coaching interviews, I'm going to tell him like Kevin O'Connell's my OC. And Sean was kind of like, yeah, sure, we'll work it out, thinking there's no way Brandon Staley's getting a job. Well, when Brandon gets the Charger job, he calls Sean and he's like, okay, it's me and Kevin. And Sean was like, or maybe he calls Kevin and says, all right, let's go. Kevin calls Sean and Sean's like, I'm not letting you go, dude. No. And so there's a whole thing with Staley and Sean. They made up, but it was tense at the time. Kevin stays, and now Staley pivots and calls Mike McDaniel and goes, hey, why don't you come be my coordinator? Well, that's a different job. Being Kyle's nominal coordinator in San Francisco when Kyle's running everything is a cool job. But being a defensive coach, Brandon Staley's coordinator with Justin Herbert as your
Right.
quarterback and carte blanche to run the offense, game plan, play call, all of it, that's a way different job. So Mike did try to get out, and Kyle had blocked him before. In this case, Mike understood why they blocked it, but he did try.
Man, and you can just feel for Mike through all of this when you read the why is everything, and it is fast because now he's in Miami. They're 1-4. I think the NFL's better when Mike McDaniel's a head coach. Like he just doesn't take himself too serious. He thinks about the sport in different ways. He's funny. I don't know, like hard turn here, but I want to get your take. Like, how does this end for him in Miami? Is it salvageable?
It's tough. I always worried with Mike, and I did with Matt LaFleur in a different way, but especially with Mike, I always worried like if he doesn't win early, how's it going to go? Because the humor, the dry delivery, the the weirdness, all the stuff that people ended up loving as they should, because it went well early. Like, is that going to play? Is he just going to get
Right.
eviscerated early and become a caricature? So luckily that didn't happen, but I am worried now that doesn't help him, and that can be a problem in the locker room too, right? Like a dry delivery, over the top statement, talking about what a G you are when you're winning games and you're kind of making fun of your, you know, deification is going to play great in the locker room. But if you try to say it defiantly when things aren't going well and like, don't worry, I'm just going to call killer plays and get us out of this, it doesn't, for example, like that wouldn't play as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm worried about all of it. I mean, and I think the biggest issue there, they were coming off of Brian Flores. So, like let's go back. The Dolphins organization was coming off of Brian Flores, whose coaching ability did not get him fired. He's not only a great defensive coordinator, but a very, very, very good coach, and had won enough to keep his job. But his people skills were brutal. And I
Right.
wrote about this last year with him and Ryan Grigson, who are both in Minnesota, who are like this odd couple. They're very close, but they both kind of owned their, uh, you know, bad bedside manner and what they do differently. Grigson won a lot of games as the Colts GM. Literally, when I decided to do the story, this is a true story. I wanted to talk to Kevin O'Connell first before I pitched it to PR and just see what, make sure he was vibing on it. I call Kevin, I go, okay, I've got this idea. You take three arrogant people, like arrogant, brusque people who've been humbled and put them in a room and talk about what's gone on with them. I'm like, Ryan Grigson, Brian Flores, and me. He started cracking up. And because I'll own it. I mean, whatever. Like, I definitely been humbled.
That's how it works
But
though. Like when Flores is one way, him and Tua, and we wrote about it too. They
yeah,
clashed.
no,
That Titans game at halftime. You're gonna go to a Mike McDaniel. Like
yeah.
you see it with all these teams. The hard pendulum swing the other direction.
Sure. And Chris Greer, the general manager, is one of the most, copacetic, well-liked dudes in the profession. So he and Flores, obviously, terrible contrast. But so it made sense they were going to try to get someone who worked well with Chris and who was a positive, upbeat presence and all that. And I think Mike, of course, sensed that and played into it. He was smart to accentuate the positive, and he did with Tua right away, and it really really changed Tua, and it was awesome. I think in retrospect they were so speaking it into existence on Tua that they before they had to were like, we're going all in and paying him like a guy. And as you know, that's the conundrum in the modern NFL is, if you have a quarterback that you pay like that cap wise, who's transcendent, obviously if it's a Mahomes or a Lamar or a Josh Allen or Burrow, you're like, oh yeah, duh, like of course, and that quarterback will cover up a lot of the accompanying cap weaknesses because they're just so good, and like, duh, we're gonna pay, you know, Lamar Jackson top of market. Or if you have someone on a rookie deal and you can load up around them like the 49ers did with Brock Purdy, the idea was to do it with Trey Lance. Obviously, that blew up, but then they lucked into getting Purdy with the 262nd pick the next year. So it was like, pay everyone, like the Seahawks did with Russell Wilson back in the day. Pay everyone, and we'll just ride this rookie deal as long as we can. Those are two perfectly enviable situations. The conundrum is when you're in that middle ground, when you've got a guy and you like him and he's better than someone else you're going to go be able to get. So you got to pay him, but you don't know if he's going to elevate. And there are it's a spectrum, right? Like Dak Prescott's probably high end of that.
Hmm.
Like really good. We really like him. We're definitely paying him. And can he get us over when we don't have a good defense? Like, I don't know. So far, no. And then you have like the lower end of that spectrum, which, right now probably looks like Trevor Lawrence, who we still don't know about, where you're like, and, Tua, when he's balling and healthy, kind of looks like he's getting to the higher end of that. But then there's plenty of times where it doesn't. And so, you want to avoid having to make that decision. But once you make that decision, you really want to be sure and feel good about it. Or you end up doing these stop gap middle ground things and hope they work out, like the Baker Mayfields and the Sam Darnolds, which were two good examples of it. But although neither worked in Carolina, I would add, environment matters.
Scout team pass rusher. I think Baker, that's really where his future was there in Carolina. You got a nice little snapshot there. All right, Matt LaFleur. We can't close this podcast out without digging into the agitator. He gets under people's skin. He says things in public setting, not public setting, like they'll be at a party or they'll be at a meeting, they'll be out, and he just says what's on everybody else's mind. Can you kind of bring to life what kind of personality Matt LaFleur has and why he became known as really the agitator? I forget how you described him in the book. What was the word that you used?
Yeah, the shit disturber. I'm trying to remember,
Yeah, yeah. He's the shit
yeah, maybe
disturber.
the agitator. But there's these two parts of Matt LaFleur that it's a weird combo. It's there's this earnest, non-conniving kind of purity that is, very bizarre in the coaching world where everyone's scheming, and I'm sure he's hardened,
Hmm.
over time, but almost like this, you know, wow, I'm just going to kind of blurt this out and nobody would ever accuse me of manipulating because I'm just, I kind of have this purity of purpose. But he's also got this, agitation thing. And the way Sean McVay described it to me is, he's like, kind of like, I mean, a terrible zone. Like, let's say it's during a game and the, you know, the opposing safety keeps dropping down and blowing up our jet sweep. And, our guys aren't picking it up and our coaches aren't adjusting and everyone keeps alerting me to it. And I finally just lose my shit and say, nobody mentioned the safety. I get it, okay? And then like everyone's kind of like, damn. And then like, couple minutes later, you'll hear Matt LaFleur go, "Hey, Sean, you might want to look out for the safety here." Damn it! And,
I
I
love
think
it.
it was Jero Evero, who's the Panthers defensive coordinator, who, when talking about Sean and Matt's, short time together with the Rams, uh, and how Sean used to yell at him and how Matt used to yell back, and they'd have these, they'd say brutal things to each other. I think Jero Evero's line to me was, they must be really good friends.
Yeah.
Because if not, like, I can't see two people talking to each other that way. Whereas with Kyle, he would just, as Joe Staley put it, he would bad dog McDaniel constantly. And he kind of did it to Saleh too, which is why it's interesting that Saleh's back. And that's a whole other
Yeah.
subject. But yeah,
But I think LaFleur's kind of adopted a lot of Shanahanisms, right? He's hard on his coaches. Like he
yeah,
pushes his coaching staff.
yeah.
And I think Green Bay needed that in a lot of ways, right? They needed to become this harder, tougher team. I mean, like, where is that line, right? Like how hard do you
Well,
push?
and the other thing he did is he sat back and watched the disaster, which almost became Aaron Rodgers getting traded before the 2021 season. They ended up keeping it together and then going a year too long by everyone's
Yeah.
admission. But when I was in Denver for that draft for NFL Network, and there's, my friends and family always joke with me that stories come up around me that like I have this weird luck or affliction that like wherever I go it turns out to be and so there was a moment when I was doing hits for NFL Network where not only was the Aaron Rodgers wants to be traded stuff breaking suddenly, but it looked like he might go to Denver that night, and people were texting me like, "Really?" And it turned out. But uh, in the wake of that, which was precipitated by the drafting of Jordan Love during COVID, which was a remote draft, and Goody just kind of doing it, and Matt not being part of it and having to react to it, and Aaron not knowing it was coming. So I think there was a come to Jesus moment in the organization where Matt and Goody and Russ Ball and Mark Murphy all kind of had to be like, okay, this way we've done it where front office is its own thing and coaches just coach and they don't really have this level of communication that a lot of the successful NFL franchises do. We need to change that a little bit and the coaches need to be a little more in the loop and there needs to be, kind of this alignment that we haven't had here for decades. That all got better.
Yeah.
And that's a big evolution there too. And now obviously with Ed Policy, who came from, his father Carmen was part of that 49er dynasty that I covered as the Eddie DeBartolo's right-hand man and team president. So he's got a more, yeah, we got to take big swings and get after it and not just sit back passively. So you put all that in the stew and you get a Micah Parsons trade. It's pretty cool.
Everybody should read this book. We're only scratching the surface here. Raheem Morris, there's some great stories there. I love how he'll just like fall asleep. Doesn't matter what's going on in his life, how stressful things are. 2 seconds, he's out.
He can go right to sleep.
Yeah.
he told his wife they were he was taking a job in LA and moving across the country,
Yeah,
uh, and went right to sleep. I think he proposed to her and what there's a lot of moments where
that's
Raheem
right. That's right.
Morris,
He did.
yeah,
I mean,
just
the
you would think he wouldn't go right to sleep, and he was able to do it. Yeah, no, it's really cool because I covered Raheem as a as a young coach, very young coach in Tampa, sudden coach. They fired John Gruden suddenly. He became the young head coach. He went 10-6 in year two with Josh Freeman, almost made the playoffs like it was wild, but he only lasted 3 years. He was admittedly like blurred the lines a little bit, was kind of close to his players, went out with his players who he known as a position coach. And um, it partly because of racism and the systemic racism, partly because of just circumstance. It took 15 years for him to get another chance, which was crazy to me. But he did finally in Atlanta, and it's really, really cool. There's a chapter in the book called Enemy Friends about Shanahan and McVay, which is enemy first for a reason. But that's a quote from Raheem, who is like legit best friends with Kyle going back to their days in Tampa as QCs, or Kyle was a QC, quality
the
control
combine
coach.
story's wild. I didn't know
Yeah,
about
right.
that.
They got whole, yeah, yeah. One of the craziest things to happen at Indy at night, late at night, involving NFL people. Although it's probably not going to be the craziest after recent events. Too soon.
Never
Uh,
too soon. I mean,
yeah,
the
and
more we learn about Mark Sanchez, no, it's not too soon.
yeah,
You can go in.
but yeah, and then very close to Sean McVay, won a Super Bowl with him as the Rams defensive coordinator. So, yet Kyle and Sean are definitely not that close like that. So it is kind of funny, but yeah, I just, everyone was really kind of willing to be, other than Kyle, who did it in other ways, but everyone was really open and unguarded and, you know, willing to look at their own flaws in a really cool way
Yeah.
in this book. Sean McVay, I think probably before he read it was, who I've known for a while and, you know, gotten pretty close with. He kind of said something to the effect of like, "Hey, do I get killed in this book?" And there are certainly things in here that Sean McVay, I guarantee, doesn't like the anecdote about Jared Goff when it was getting bad with the two of them being up at the line and hearing Sean McVay in the headset go, "Yeah, this play will work if Jared doesn't fuck it up." And
Yeah.
I think maybe Sean thought his, the mic was off because it hit the 15 seconds, or maybe he just was so disgusted in that moment and wasn't thinking. But, to say that with your starting quarterback about to take a snap is a sign that things are going really bad. So Sean was kind of like, "Hey, do I get killed in this?" And what I said to him was, the beautiful thing about you is that I don't really have to crush you because you bleed all over the place and kill,
Yeah.
murder yourself in these quotes. He's so introspective and hard on himself in so many ways as part of the journey that all I had to do was kind of quote Sean and then cite some examples, some of which he brought up. And then, yeah, I probably fleshed out some details that he doesn't love being in a book and hopefully you know, streaming project eventually or whatever comes out of this.
Well,
But
it helps when you
like,
participate, right? We want your
yeah,
voice
but
in these
like
books, in these stories.
Sean's so honest and cool about owning his own shit that like, it's not me doing it. But yeah, it's funny. I've got this big story coming out in the next couple of days. I don't know when this
Ooh.
is posting, but big story coming out in early October for The Athletic, and it's about I can tell you because it's about to come out now. Otherwise, you would
I was gonna say I was gonna pull it
do a
out of you.
better version of it. But
I'm psyched.
it's about the London games over the years in the NFL and how that's been kind of a snake pit for teams and coaches and players. And some of them we know, right? Like coaches getting fired because they lost in London and then there's a bye. But, one of the incidents that I talk about in this story, and there's a lot of really funny ones, uh, is one that I remember from Raheem's first year. So way back in whatever that was, 2007, Tampa, 2009,
Wow, they've
maybe
been going over there
2009.
that long. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
2009 maybe. And uh, they go over there and they play the Patriots and get killed. And they, as many teams did then and some do now, they stayed the night because of the way the flight shook out and just flew in the morning. So there was this celebrated screaming match with Raheem Morris and Aqib Talib in the lobby of the team hotel after Talib showed up way after curfew. Uh, the version that Raheem and Talib both told me, and Raheem did it for the book, is that it really got bad when Mike Allstott, who was recently retired, kind of went old school on Talib and got in his face. And Talib reacted like Aqib Talib you would expect when being told by some former player to go to bed. And I, by the way, I talked to Allstott for this too. So this story that's coming out in the Athletic, it will have a version from Talib, Raheem, and
Oh
Mike
man.
Allstott. And but I remember at the time that was kind of used against Raheem by his critics as a sign that he's not ready, he's too close to his players, he's not respected. Here he's got this, young cornerback yelling at him in public who missed curfew, and feels like he could talk to him like that. And so it is true, and Raheem owns it in the book that he was young and he's a lot different now, and a lot more ready to be an NFL head coach. But it is funny that the incident itself wouldn't have been that bad, probably, if Mike Allstott didn't inject himself. And
Yeah.
you know, it's
He had the neck
it's.
roll on. I'm just assuming that he wears that out,
I
you know,
mean,
in public as
listen,
well.
I went and Mike Allstott in his second year, I went out there and did a SI big story on him, and everyone at the time was like, Mike Allstott, he lifts cars and he's a throwback. And I don't know, Ty, I just came at it from a weirder. I was like, he's a kid from Joliet, Illinois, who's now a sudden, unlikely star in the Tampa St. Pete area, single. And I have a feeling this guy is living a life that, many recent college graduates, from Purdue who grew up in Joliet and are now down in the Sunshine State as a folk hero might be enjoying. And so Allstott reluctantly let me go home with him on a Friday and then hang, beginning at this bar in St. Pete that's weirdly west facing, and you could see the sunset, which as a Californian, I was like, oh, it's like a normal beach bar. And we started there, and yeah, luckily there was no curfew or sobriety test that night because neither of us were in condition to do much. So it's funny me, I calling Mike Allstott after all these years, and I'm like, all right, I got to talk about a drunken escapade involving, and he's just laughing at me like,
That's
dude, what
incredible.
what happened? Where are we?
It's such a balance for coaches with the Gen Z modern athlete because I love Mike McDaniel, his approach, all of that, but then you hear, okay, a player's late to a meeting, he'll fine him, but he's not going to publicly touch it, right? There's nothing beyond the fine. It's kind of hush hush, and then I got to know Mike Vrabel's Patriots here a couple weeks ago, and it's like meeting number one, pick up that dirty washcloth, and if you don't, by the way, I just informed the equipment staff to not wash them, just dry them. So you'll be washing yourself with dirty ass washcloths if you don't do that. And you don't show up 1 minute late, and when you do show up, the phone stays in the bag. It's on silent. But
I
also, like
love
players love Mike Vrabel. He relates to him. They know that he played. It's a hard man. That's a tough job. You can't be too buddy buddy, but you can't go full Mike Zimmer. You can't make your players hate their lives, hate their jobs, and they did at the end in Minnesota. It's got to be something in the middle.
God, the Vrabel LaFleur year. I remember because
Oh yeah, you get into that.
I covered Vrabel as a player for a long time. I know Vrabel really, really well. I love both guys, but Matt was like, I wasn't sure how Matt was, he was leaving the nest with Sean. And, as you referenced, he'd been the taint in the relationship between Matt Ryan and Kyle, in Atlanta. And I was worried. I was like, how's my sweet friend going to do with Vrabel And I purposely went to Titans training camp, and we ended up getting Matt. We had a great group, and we got Matt to come out and hang with us at this rooftop bar, and he he kind of had some swag to him in a cool way. I was like, okay, this might work, but the stories I heard from both sides of him and Vrabel, it just was such a culture clash, you know. And Vrabel would always say, "Well, this is how we did it in New England," and Matt did not want to hear that. And uh, uh, I think there's a line in the book where LaFleur says he's getting ready to take this job with Vrabel, and Raheem calls him and goes. Raheem, I think, was still in Atlanta, and calls him and goes, what are you doing? Do you know who you're going to work for? And not even dissing Vrabel, but just like you too
Yeah.
is a strange mix. But yeah, no, I love seeing Vrabel. You know, I love all that. And you're right, it is hard. I think, you know, in McDaniel's case, Tyreek and certainly Jalen Ramsey would be two examples of people who, in retrospect, he probably should have been a little more public or been a little stronger about trying to rein that stuff in. It's harder to do that after the fact. It's easier to go from tougher at first to loosening it up, which I'm
Right.
sure
Yeah.
Vrabel will do, than to
Kind of
go
like Sean
from
McDermott here.
yeah, although it is, I understand why Mike came in the way he did again because of the Flores, following Flores. But yeah, I think the other thing people always have to remember is these hard and fast rules. I mean, how good are you? You know, Bill Belichick, the ultimate taskmaster, along with Bill Parcells, let Lawrence Taylor do a lot of things that anyone else would not have been able to get away with.
Right.
But he was Lawrence Taylor. And so, it, you can always see it like, the whole diva receiver cliche and, AJ Brown being the latest who's being stigmatized. But there's levels, right? Antonio Brown, there's levels of
Yeah.
difficult receiver. And, you can tell like late in a career when a guy drops off, a receiver who does that but is like good energy can play for years when his skills have diminished. You know, Keenan Allen right now is going to have a long career if he wants. And he's not the Keenan Allen who, you know, was young Keenan Allen
Yeah.
physically, but he's a great route runner and he's a good teammate and good energy. And he'll stay in the league a long, long time. When T.O. started to drop off, or Randy Moss, like, yeah, they got a couple chances, but like people weren't putting up with it anymore, you know. So Antonio Brown, right? Like, yeah, okay, we'll keep giving you some chances because you were Antonio Brown, but you're not gonna hang out and be a long time player. So that's always the calculus too. How good is this player and how integral to our success are they? Sadly, right? That's just the way it is.
I mean,
So
Brandon Bean could have told Stephon Diggs, "I know you want out, but you're playing for us. Like
right.
we gave you that money. You're gonna play." And
And they hit a
instead,
point
they
with
said,
Stephon.
"Well,
Yeah, they hit a point with Stephon Diggs where they were like, "It's better if we don't have
yep,
him, and it'll
completely,
free up Josh to spread it around and run the offense." And on one level, it's been a huge success for them. On another level, they still haven't won a Super Bowl or gotten there. And Stephon Diggs just showed up and
right."
you know balled out for Mike Vrabel's Patriots on national TV. So yeah, it's always it's always a calculus, but I think Raheem the second time around is as good as I thought he'd be. I'm hoping the results, follow. McDaniel is in a really tough spot. Um, and I'm a little worried. Was worried about that Thursday night game. They played pretty well. They won one. They just lost to Carolina. There's a game in November where they go to Madrid, I think, or Berlin, and then there's a bye. So like, I'm hoping he gets it rolling and you know fights through this. Matt LaFleur quietly has done one of the great coaching jobs, and transitioning to Jordan Love as part of it. I, I'm sure there's pressure there, especially now with new leadership and head policy, but I think he's one of the most underappreciated head coaches. McVay is McVay, and Kyle, for all his, you know, all the times I poke fun of him, and I had to do it a lot as a Chronicle columnist, his obsession with the 2-for-1 in a weird OCD, awkward way, ending with the ball at halftime and
Yeah.
then getting it for the second half kickoff to the point where he'll like be running out time at the 50 with like instead of going for a touchdown just to make sure he maybe try a field goal. All the weird OCD Kyle things that you can fairly criticize him for, including not valuing special teams, which has burned them, including in
Yes.
the Super Bowl.
Flores had
But
the same problem.
he's so good at certain things, and what he
Yeah.
and Sala are doing this season early is a masterclass. So, and you see the offshoots, you see Kevin O'Connell, you've seen the offshoots where it didn't go well, like Nathaniel Hackett. But for the most part, D'Amico Ryans, like, this is about a third of the league now, teams that are touched directly by this group. And you're right. We talk about the pettiness, we talk about scheme, but I think the overarching thing for me in this book, and I would encourage everyone, the paperback's about to come out and it has a updated chapter which takes you through the end of 2023, including the Ben Johnson, Matt LaFleur little.
Nice. All
Yeah,
right.
so we have some fun. There's Sala messing with Kyle last year or trying to. Like there's some fun stuff. But the overarching theme is I would say the scientists have overtaken the meatheads. That old thing that I came up covering and you've seen that still exists, that gym teacher like, just do it because it works. Why do we run it
Yeah.
this way? That's the way Bill Walsh ran it. That's how it is. Just, you know, don't ask us why. Just
Yeah.
do it our way. Has been replaced by not just this group, but by the ethos that you find in this group, which is we want to know why. There's a purpose for everything. It's an ecosystem. There's got to be a reason for us to justify it. We want to be able to convey that reason to our players to get them to buy in. That's a key part of our motivation, not just, bite them in the kneecaps. Sorry, Dan. Dan Campbell,
But
incredible
that's
motivator.
he
But
is
like, not
science and meat. That's the thing.
yeah,
Even a Dan Campbell.
not just want it more than them, or we're gonna be tougher. But like, if I show you how selling this route 5 times leads to a breakaway run that you can be part of as a blocker, wide receiver, and I can bring that to life on video, and you can understand why it's important, you will be more likely to buy in. So, and then the innovation on the fly, oh man, we just got thrown. We have to play a quarterback who's only running offense out of the pistol in the NFL. How are we going to teach him our scheme in 4 months? No, no, no. We're just going to run our offense out of the pistol. We'll innovate on the fly. We'll ask questions. All that is endemic to this group, and they've all done it differently and innovated and changed. And you see McVay now with the inside running and all that, but they've all been part of that mindset. Like we'll evolve as we go to meet circumstances. And so it will make a reader understand football in that way for sure, that, oh, there's stuff going on here. It's not just, oh, I've got this, menu of plays. Like, and
Hmm.
some coaches do it that way, but you hear, I think Al Michaels was joking on the Amazon broadcast about Kyle Shanahan's Cheesecake Factory menu, and oh, they're on dessert by now. It's overtime. But Kyle Shanahan doesn't see it as a menu, and these guys, they see it as an ecosystem. So every play has a purpose. Everything is part of something, and it's more about we're going to do things that make you in a bad position based on how you're taught to do it, and you'll then counter on the fly, and we'll have a counter to your counter, and it's all here. But it's not like, oh, this cool running play would be fun to call. Maybe I'll call this pass play. Every play is interwoven and
Yeah.
has a purpose, and it doesn't always go the way you want it, but that's the concept behind it.
Please do yourself a favor, buy the book, listen to the book, read Mike Silver at The Athletic. I can't wait for this London story, everything
I
you
have you
produce.
back here somewhere. So also, I'm sure your book is still easy to find. Uh, Tight ends are way cooler than they used to be, and that is how I would tell people that is how you could really understand that.
Well, man, this was great. I mean, so much insight. This was fun as hell. I'm gonna have to twist your arm to get you back on here, Mike. Thanks so much. I talked to you for another hour, but I got to go pick the kids up at school. This was
Yeah, that's
awesome.
more important. And this is how life comes at you fast. I'm actually returning a leased car today, and it is a car that I liked a lot, but unfortunately, the person who founded and runs the company, uh, let's just say that some of the gestures he made conspicuously in public, one in particular, or some of the things he has espoused do not align with my anti-hate, pro-democracy beliefs. And so
Okay.
sadly, I'm returning that car for an electric vehicle made by an American manufacturer that is not founded by someone who likes Nazi salutes. But be that as it
Oh my
may,
God.
this is how life comes at you fast. I'm returning that car, and then I need a ride back. It's about 25 miles away from me. So my youngest of three, who I used to have to pick up from school, who now works uh, for a California state senator in Sacramento,
Oh,
or maybe assemblyman. I don't want to get this wrong, but he will be picking me up. Because he's been driving for 7 years and driving me home. So all that time, all those pickups,
all
if
right.
if everything goes well, they can come
He'll
back
come
to you.
back around. I love it. This was great. Hey, thanks so much, and best of luck on your travels out there with your son.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mike.
I